everybody, to episode 12 of the Wine Insiders podcast. Our insiders are back, including Laurie from Oushinery.
Hi, everyone.
Nick from Wine Owners.
Hi.
Jonathan from Bottlebooks.
Hello.
And Seb from Troly.
Good morning. I feel like I need to have some sort of a clown whip whip.
Today, we're going to cover a couple of new startups in the wine tech field that happen to have female founders, which is quite interesting. And especially since we have Laurie on board here, we want to get some insights into what that experience is like, and to cover those technologies to see if those are interesting, and also maybe talk a little bit about the champagne battle between Russia and France. Laurie, as of 2018, 10% of California's producers had a woman winemaker, 4% were owned by women, and 6.6% of people running Fortune 500 companies are women. And of the 20% of global startups raising money in 2019, 20% had a female founder. Could you tell us a little bit about what it's like being a woman in a very male-dominated thing? Are there advantages? Are there disadvantages? What has been tough? What's it really like?
It's been interesting. Like, first and foremost, I became a founder, an entrepreneur, a little bit, not by mistake, but I had an idea and an itch, and I just started open a website, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. So I never really went through the motion of I want to be an entrepreneur and let's think of an idea and a product market fit. And I just kind of fell into it. And for the longest time, I was looking to fail, or at the very least to pivot. You you hear that in the world of startup, you have an idea, and then suddenly it changes. We all heard of the story, Instagram and Slack and so on. Still hasn't happened. It's funny, I go back and forth. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and it is, because it is not far from both Seattle, think about 3-hour drive, and San Francisco, think less than 3-hour flight, all in the same time zone. Even though it's the Canadian pace and it's a bit a Canadian attitude, which is a bit less go and money, everything, it still has a bit of a Silicon tech feel, and there's a very nice community support for startup and for founders in particular. I would say that my own challenge that I've seen is there's almost a division. I'm part of startup. I wouldn't say incubators, but just kind of they call themselves university, which is also not right if you ask me, but just kind of classes support on how to do sales when you're selling software and something like that. And this is, more often than not, I'm still the only woman in there, or just maybe there's two and everybody else is men. That, by the way, more often than not, really awesome people that just happen to be men. And then I'm also part of company association Forum Women Entrepreneur here in Canada, which is on purpose, giving you mentors to work on maybe the skills or the aptitudes that weren't developed through your childhood. Often women were girl before, and we were supposed to be the good girl, the one that just doesn't create waves, that only speaks when her arm is raised and the teacher calls her out. Things like that in the world of raising money or building things just makes everything a slug or more difficult. And this, while I love the community there, and I really appreciate the support and have fantastic mentors, I find it's a bit more challenging because more often than not, it is absolutely not tech related. There's still this division. There's more and more women founder and incredibly doing incredible business, but a lot of it is women product related, which we need. But personally, I'm not interested in doing baby bum cream. I'm not interested in doing, new hygienic products, or even a lot of food products, things like that. And I find sometimes the gap and a bit of frustration on my side. It's just it almost feels like there's a category of also women companies that women fund, and I get frustrated. Often it's not a lot of tech. So I'm super excited about like the companies we're going to be talking afterwards with the panelists, because they happen to be women and they are like deep in technology, leveraging artificial intelligence and so much more. And that gets me excited. At the end of the day, I define myself as a founder that happened to be a woman. Like, you know, like it's just like sometimes I would like to have the advantages, and sometimes it's also like that does not define me. Like I'm creating a company, I have a staff that is eclectic, a team that is awesome, and yeah, I just happen to be a woman, and that's yeah. So it's just like a hate love, but it is what it is. I can't change my gender, right? Well, actually, yeah. I could.
We're seeing a lot of activity down that path as well. And look, I think there's one point here to be made. We are talking about female founders from a tech standpoint, tech startup standpoint. The wine industry also fairly specifically is grappling with gender inequity. You're looking at usually less than 10% in most countries are female driven or female orientated. So this is not just tech, this is also not just wine, it's a fairly broad problem. I was reading an article a couple of months ago, which basically highlighted how publicly listed companies who have females on their board actually do better. And so we definitely do need to get more females involved, right? Now, the question back to you, Laurie, is I was talking to a female winemaker based out of Australia who won prizes with her wines out of the UK, and she actually declined the prizes because she won the best female winemaker as opposed to the best winemaker. Yeah. Should we really try and have a fast track, a separate category? Should we try and divide and try and help women like highlight themselves, spotlight on themselves by having a different category? Because statistically speaking, if you've got 10% of female winemakers, you're bound to have more male wines being created. So it's going to be a lot harder for female to differentiate. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing in your opinion?
Oh, I had debates around wine with other girlfriends. Like, you know, it's not easy. I would always remember like years ago even, I can't remember if it was Natalie Portman or something like that, but there was like the Hollywood gala, and then there was the Hollywood female gala, and she started a speech. She's like, oh, you know, the other one is just called Hollywood. Like, you know, like it's not called Hollywood Male Gala. Like, you know, like it's just...
correct.
We even see that as well, you know, in the world of like fake tech company, like WeWork versus The Wing, which The Wing was a co-working space only for women. And I just, like, to me, I don't think it moves the needle enough because it's not dissociating. Like the reality is like men are here and contributing as well. So like, it's just like, but at the same time, I'm also like, okay, I'm a female founder, but full disclosure, I'm white. I am educated. I come from France. I have a dual nationality. Like, I come to the disadvantage, but I have all the other advantages possible. So like, I think even I, as a female founder, I'm, you know, in a way, like at the top just by luck of how I was born and educated. So it's back and forth. I think just the emphasis on just like the female, even when you like when we start female, it's just like, am I a female, am I a woman, or just like you know, like even that, like female is almost sounds like I almost have a problem with that word. It's really challenging. I don't have the solution, but I also know it personally gives me drive. It's just because I almost want to bust those cliches as well. So like, it's a love-hate relationship for me personally. That being said, I don't lose sleep over it. Like this is, like I said, like I don't define myself as a business, you know, like female owned or something, but if the Canadian government give like extra like grant money for female founder, I'm like, well, you know, I pay my taxes and this is put aside for female founders. So maybe, but even that, I question myself.
I could probably change my name and go for it.
Yeah, no easy answer there.
Look, it's definitely not straightforward. It's definitely not straightforward. And likewise, there is a company I'm working with based out of California They're trying new packaging, and they wanted to have a minority winemaker as well to try a new style, right? Or so either a black winemaker or a brown winemaker, a female winemaker, and they struggled to find one.
Yeah.
They couldn't hire one because there's not enough, right? Look, it's a very, very, very tricky problem. And I also do think that while, look, we're equal opportunities, but we're physically thinking and feeling things differently. Boys are not educated to be emotionally intelligent, genuinely speaking. I'm just generalizing. And as a result, we're seeing businesses and startups being created with a very different eye over similar problems, right? Guys tend to be rational. Guys tend to be, a bit more structured and organized.
Yeah, like that's probably true. And I think women can have that more. I think something that I've been discovering in the last few months, like reading about it and just like honestly, like even sharing articles with my mom, I'll always be remembered. So I always, thankfully was top of class, but I always had like my teacher, and I would be reprimanded like, oh, speaks too much. Like, and too like, and okay, I love talking, but like too present, like just speak. And I'm like, in retrospect, would I have been a boy? Would this have been highlighted on my own report card? I'm not sure. Like I was literally being like, don't take that much space, Laurie. Don't take that much space. And I think it's like very sneaky, but I think it kind of like ripples in your grown-up life, like, Sheryl Sandberg, like lover, hater, like lately mostly hater, but like, like leaning in and standing at the table and raising your voice, taking space, speaking out. I can rationalize that. It makes a lot of sense. If you don't ask a question, nobody can answer. But at the same time, we were kind of conditioned to like, don't do way. Like it's something that I've been realizing lately, and I'm trying to not contradict, but be aware that, and like saying sorry all the time. Now I'm really conscious if I say sorry, it's because I did something wrong, not because I want to appear nice.
And that's a repercussion of having a Canadian passport, right? You literally just learn to say sorry with every time you have a sentence.
Yeah.
So one of the companies that Laurie alluded to is Tastry, who came on our radar, female founder or not. Just so happens that Katrina Alexson founded Tastry. Also, she has a technical mind, and she came up with a lot of the tech behind it, it seems. And Tastry uses artificial intelligence to analyze tens of thousands of wines a year, generating vast streams of data to help winemakers and retailers produce and target their products more effectively. I know that the founders have looked into this a little bit. What do we think about this technology? They've been using it in the US for a bit. Now they're trying to go more global, bringing it to Europe. I don't know, Nick, you had some thoughts. You were able to look into it a little bit. Thought of some other companies doing similar things. What do you see there?
So coincidentally, I was recently introduced to a company called Wine also using artificial intelligence in order to try and essentially provide personalized recommendations. So, and also run by a female founder, Pam Dillon. I think it's interesting. I think being able to evaluate a significant amount of data and seeing how effective or let's say useful this is, I think is probably key to it. And I think it's interesting that you've got two businesses using AI, taking quite different approaches, one taking very much a component-based approach at a very elemental level, another one taking an experiential approach involving masters of wine, involving a variety of market participants. So Wine has patented technology, for example. I guess Tastry probably does as well. I can see that there's a really great application here within what I'd kind of call the sort of mainstream premium market, the sort of, the wine, wine in the spectrum maybe of perhaps 10 to $20 a bottle or something like that, where where people really just want to engage at a fairly broad level with, are these the sorts of characteristics of wine that I think that I might enjoy? I think it gets a little bit trickier beyond that point. I think it's tricky, for example, to analyze chemical components and determine that a wine is going to have a certain set of characteristics as a consequence of that. I think Bordeaux 2020 is actually a really interesting example of that, where you've got wines with incredibly high pH values, suggesting extremely low acidity, and yet the human experience in some of those wines feels like those wines are fresh, but they're not fresh as a result of underlying acidity. They're fresh as a result of other perceptions, or perhaps as a result of winemaking. What some of this stuff isn't necessarily going to do is pull apart those wines that are whole bunch with those wines that are made without any of the stems at all, and just made using whole berries. So I think, one needs to be cautious. I think I do see a increasing application for this stuff in B2B2C. So I really see these tools, and particularly where some AI-derived insights are then validated by other inputs such as MW input, and using that as a recommendation engine, replacing the very basic tools that exist on wine e-commerce today with something that's much more driven by your preferences, your purchasing history, and all of the other kind of factors that feed into these AI models. So I really like the idea of B2B2C, because I see the wine industry engaging with ways in which to make wine easier, more accessible, easier to upsell, easier to make work and cross-sell in digital settings. So I think that's I think that's quite exciting.
Jonathan, where are we overall in terms of the wine world using data, using a lot of data, analyzing it, using AI? Are we still having trouble just collecting and getting this data? Anybody using this effectively? What's your viewpoint exchanging product data around the world?
Well, I think there is definitely still plenty of challenges around collecting product data, which we are happy to try and address. I would echo Nick's sentiments on the recommendation side. It's a very competitive market. Everybody is trying to get that 0.5% better recommendation to get a bit more revenue. But I think what I found very cool about Tastry is the other side of their business, which is doing the tank analysis to help the wineries blend their wine. And this I like, it kind of draws me back to my engineering days, was having intelligent systems assist in the engineering process and help you do things more efficiently, help you avoid making stupid mistakes. And that was possible 20, 25 years ago. I think AI just sort of takes it to the next level. Just there's more computing power available, and the pattern recognition technology and principles are better, but you still have to make it work for your domain, and that's what Tastry seems to have been able to make work, and has some very enthusiastic first customers and first partners they're working with, which is always a good indication of whether the tech is working or not.
And Laurie, are you seeing this kind of denotes the sense that maybe producers need to be more flexible, maybe need to come out with more wines and try different things? And do you see producers doing that, coming out with new labels, more successful producers, or is there any relationship there? Do you see any trends there?
Definitely more labels coming. I think from what I see on more like the marketing and packaging side, this part of tech, like this part of leveraging tech is not so much announced to the consumers. Right now, it's more like kept under wrap. Like they're putting, like, it's now more and more common to see on the labels, like, hey, we are like a B corporation, or we are like biodynamic, or like, like all this like vegan or sulfate-free, like things that consumers are searching for. I don't think necessarily we're there yet. We're just like, oh, this one was blended using artificial intelligence. I mean, that would be pretty bold, but it's just, so I think, again, like in a strange way, we don't even know like some of the bottle shots we do. Like I recognize some of the clients that we share with Tastry. So we have most likely done images for some of those wine, but it's not advertised or announced yet. So it's pretty much like kept under wrap. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It's just like still, this idea of like wine being this, like the chef in the kitchen kind of thing, like that, like the winemaker, like one of the storytelling is something that's more readily embraced and inspiring, maybe. But maybe it can change, right? Like it's just, that's where I'm coming from on that side of the business.
And Seb, when you're talking to producers and you're trying to help them sell more wine, you're advising them on getting more sales online. Are you is there a suggestion to go with their best sellers and to push those, or are you encouraging, or are you seeing value in innovating and finding new wines, new labels, new tastes?
Look, it's a very, I think same as female in tech, it's another very fascinating topic, right? Deep tech here. And I would suggest there's a big question mark around the applicability of AI in the world of wine, right? We are talking about a highly subjective product. We are talking about an experience in your mouth, an experience when you're visiting, an experience at a restaurant. And I would definitely question, I'd leave that on the table, how much is a piece of AI or an algorithm that will chemically compare wines, how much is that going to help me as a consumer discover something I would have never tried, and I'm just going to go, oh my God, all right? So there's a question there. With the winemaking tactics, I also think there's a creativity side of making wine that, look, we can engineer mass production wine to taste a certain way. We can already do that without AI, right? We're capable of we call it a bit of a soup in the industry. But ultimately, there's a question mark as to whether you want a piece of code to tell you how to make your wine taste. As a winemaker, I'm not sure. Where I do think there's a strong applicability of AI, and that's where, Troly, we are doing that today, is where it comes to optimizing the channel mix, right? So we are capable of identifying which kind of channels are going to take what kind of wines, right? Restaurants versus apps versus consumers, which are a bit more price-driven, consumers which are quick buyer versus long tail, and also on the logistics front, right? Moving wine, it's a heavy good. You don't want to move it 3, 4, 5, 6 different times. You don't want to go through too many warehouses. And so trying to optimize logistics is probably one area where AI is going to push through. But as I was saying, overall, I think from a winemaking and a creativity point of view, there's a bit of a challenge with AI. And from a matching versus, the subjectivity of the product versus, I'm walking into a winery and very unusually, I'm going to say, I don't drink that varietal, right? I'll just try it as a consumer, even if it's not the kind of bottle I would normally buy. So look, I don't think it's a clear-cut slam dunk. And just to close that off, I also don't think this is a female kind of a topic, right? There's an enormous number of AI tech startups trying to crack the world of wine, and the taste matching and the preferences matching and the chemical measuring and all of that. I'm not seeing anything new. But I am appreciating that ultimately, whatever information we can analyze and give back to the industry as to what kind of consumers are buying, what kind of wines do you need to make to get into a certain market. Any kind of information would be good to make decisions. I think, look, we're probably another 50 to 100 years away before we have a piece of AI to design a wine from scratch, right? From growing the grapes to actually making the wine to actually selling it.
There was another startup in the news recently out of Auckland, New Zealand called Cropsy, as a bunch of Auckland tech engineers led by Lila Delikovic. They are able to count the bunches of grapes on wines and detect disease and pest problems to minimize crop loss and yield estimates. Well, there's a lot, it seems like, of emerging wine tech also in the field. Nick, you have looked into this a little bit, and you have some thoughts.
Well, again, I just happen to know of another business called Saturnalia. So they're part of an aerospace business in Italy, and they started playing around with their tech to try and figure out whether they could understand, based on their satellite imagery and the canopy in one vineyard versus another, the qualitative level of a particular wine in a particular year at a given point in time. I think that's quite interesting, potentially increasingly interesting, I think, as they go forward, because they are using AI to compare results from previous years with the imagery that they are then taking in the current year. So I think, whereas I was a little bit skeptical when they first started back, I think, in the 2015 vintage, I think that as they roll forward and as they compare more and more data through their AI engine, then I think it's going to become increasingly interesting, increasingly helpful in terms of understanding qualitative levels and potential producers who have done have the potential to do well in a bit. They can clearly still screw it up in the cellar, right? In the shade. But also it kind of reminded me of a period when I was working for a large publishing business, and a lot of data was starting to be used by farmers, livestock farmers in particular, in those days, to ensure that they could control disease and make sure that their animals were kept in good conditions based on things like weather patterns and forecasts and pressure and humidity levels and all that sort of stuff. So I think all of this and this startup in New Zealand sounds extremely interesting, and I can see how a number of technologies based on things like satellites and based on health of plants and based on diseases and that kind of stuff could be used extremely positively to help manage yields from one vintage to the next, and to achieve a more consistent level of quality. I think of Chateau Dufort Vivants, and maybe to a lesser extent Chateau Parma in 2018, the Bordeaux vintage, where there was, it was an extraordinarily warm and wet May. I mean, there was surface water lying around everywhere, and they were two biodynamic producers, and mildew just swept through their vineyards. They lost 90% of their let's put it this way, they were They didn't actually. They lost about 75% of their crop. So they were down from about 40 hectolitres per hectare to about 11 in both instances. So for Dufour Vivants, which is a pretty big estate, they made the equivalent of 583 full cases. So clearly this tech can be massively helpful, particularly as we're all much more sensitive to how vineyards are managed, to make sure that the right decisions are made at the right time.
I would also chime in on that. I think going back to the Cropsy example, I think this is another illustration of how AI helps solve a problem that was only partially solvable before, but it makes it economical to do. So there's two parts I think that they had to solve to make Cropsy work. One is, of course, AI. So being able to, because you could have always gone out to the field, taken a picture and sent the picture to a horticulturalist to tell you what's up with your vines. The AI just makes it more efficient. But it still takes time to walk through the field and take pictures. So they had to build an additional piece of tech to attach to the tractor, so that now they're able just to drive the tractor through the field, and they have somebody, they're the equivalent to Lasso, pulling 100 horticulturalists to process all of the images all at once and find nuances or issues in their vines that they might not have detected until much, much later, when the issues are much, much bigger. And so I think that's where some of the AI, the AIs, where they're solving existing problems that are really dropping the economic or improving the economics of some of these tasks. It's like the satellite, how difficult is it to get that much data in that much time? And well, you have some devices a bit higher up in the atmosphere, and they can do it a lot more efficiently than flying planes all over the place to try and get that, or drones or what have you. So I think those are really, really cool tech.
And it's also where AI is truly creating a bit of a leveled field by aggregating so much data, by reading so much patterns and trends across the world, and being able to inform the production process, right? For sure, the question is really, when we turn around and want to try and have AI to sell wine, or AI to define what kind of wine are you going to make to maximize your dollar revenue, and what kind of wine is a consumer going to buy next? I think that's a whole different ballgame. And this is not just wine specific, by the way. This is food specific. This is craft specific. It's far broader than just wine. Think about craft brews. Think about craft spirits as well.
So this week, Russia is now requiring champagne producers from France to label their champagne sparkling wine in Russia, and allowing sparkling wine producers in Russia to use the word Shampanskoye, badly pronounced. Laurie, being our resident French expert, how insulting could you get do a more insulting thing? How insulting is this, and what kind of pain in the ass is this for labeling?
And just for argument's sake, can we just clarify, how long ago did Laurie leave France?
Okay, I left France 15 years ago, but I still have a French passport. My sister was born in Champagne, so I still have ties. For sure. It's definitely, when you touch wine in France, it's almost as important as soccer, football. It's pretty high. And Champagne, a bit like Bordeaux and Burgundy, they are a crown jewels. They're just some things that just take a lot of pride that we're known for. It's it's Russia as well, so it's not the best political landscape and scenarios. There's also all this extra layer on top. It's been really making the news and make people completely like scandalized, like French people can do very well. But it is fascinating. I was looking a bit at the history for this, and Champagne was one of the first appellation protected, and it dates back from 1843. So like the appellation like Champagne, it's just like something that even back then knew they had to protect. Yeah, and it's just like fascinating to me. And just to give some context a little bit, to show like what's interesting is it's only 2 million bottles of French champagne, which, you know, for the sake of argument, I still call like that's champagne, the actual one. 2 million bottles that is being exported and sold to Russia, which makes it the 15th market. So it's not like a ton, but it is high value. Like it's, you know, rich Russian people that buy and purchase this product. And just to, I can't pronounce the Russian version, the one that they make in Russia, which apparently really doesn't follow at all the same fermentation method or anything like that. They produce 220 million bottles of it. And of course, the price point is incredibly different. Usually it's about like €3 a bottle, from, you know, like on average. And I mean, I wish, I don't wish that champagne was €3 a bottle, but sometimes I wish it was a bit cheaper. But so it's really like not even apple and oranges. So I can see the confusion, but I like seeing the politics around it, like how like Moet and Chandon and like LVMH, they're just like trying to deal, because then the French foreign minister is like going in, like, you know, like there's a lot of political on top. Just the fact that even Vladimir Putin, you know, himself with flags like made the announcement, like it's just, I think to me, like it's like, oh, like it's also like one of these other things where wine is used as a political, you know, tool. Yeah, I like, yeah, it makes me laugh a little bit, but I can't imagine like it must be a bit heartbreaking for like champagne producer, because they're also experiencing a lot right now with climate change.
And look, we're talking about a much broader topic of appellation, good or bad, right? We now have wines being sold, excuse me, in China, wines being grown in China, but being produced under French guidance and French winemakers, and sometimes even the juice goes to France and goes back to China, and it's labeled as classic Bordeaux French wines. Is that right or is that wrong? So I think, look, ultimately, it's the concept of appellation is really going down to the subjective nature of the product, and do we want to try and help consumers realize this comes from this area, this is how it is, or not, right? Same as using varietals as a wine name that most of the world does, except for France, right?
Except for France.
Italy, or the old world.
I will always remember, so I moved to Canada in 2006, and I started designing wine labels for the Okanagan, the wine region here in British Columbia. And I, you know, the first time I go back to France, like, you know, family food, you know, and my uncle was like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm designing wine labels. It's super fun. And like, oh, can you show me? And, you know, I showed like, and especially because like we use varietal, and then use this varietal in French, like, and I showed him like a Pinot Noir label that I designed. And he's like, whoa, it's Pinot Noir. Like that can't be in Canada. I'm like, well, it's the name of the grape. Like right there, like it was just kind of like very interesting. Like it was, because of course France has no idea that Canada does wine, but it's just like, and it does Pinot Noir written in, like I just remember like the like amazement, not in a good way, of a French bird. Like it was just fascinating that way too. Like things we take for granted, you know, but it's just like it's not there. Like he was really aghast by it, and just like, I mean, my uncle has other issues, but like there was just like his immediate perception of it was just like fascinating to watch, observe.
Jonathan, Bottlebooks has created a standard data set for wines, and one of these things is appellations. How difficult is it to balance all of these political
I want to hear appellation, yes or no, good or bad.
I think it's just I think it's just fact. It's the way the industry works and classifies the wine and organizes it, and it's difficult because it's also a moving target. So I think that's one of the challenges that traditional systems have, is that they they need some stability, and appellations, yes, they're not all changing all the time, but there's enough change out there. I mean, one of the most frequently changing regions is Austria, that every 2 or 3 years there is a new reformulation of the DACs there, and so if you have a system where you're saying, well, give me all of the wines with this DAC, well, that DAC was valid from 2013 to 2015. It didn't change in 2016. It's the exact same bottle of wine from the exact same property. Nothing changed, except it's no longer that region. So how do you classify that? And it is an interesting challenge to overcome. It keeps you on your toes. But I think going maybe one step further on this is like going back to the champagne, is that before tech, before Vivino, before Pinterest, before Instagram, let's say that the champagne houses go ahead and actually put sparkling wine on their labels and remove champagne. 20 years ago, nobody would have known that. Only people living in Russia buying the wine in Russia would know that. But now somebody using Vivino snaps a picture of one of these bottles, or it goes up on Instagram. All of a sudden, the rest of the world thinks that LVMH makes sparkling wine. And so it does have potentially international, it can have an impact on the brand outside of Russia as well, due to the internet, perhaps, which is very, it adds a new dimension to those discussions, I guess.
It's look, we're living in an increasingly globalized world, right? And that exact topic is going to keep on happening. New countries are going to try and come up with different ways of differentiating their products. You're looking at New Zealand wool. You're looking at alpaca, for instance. They have the same kind of patterns they're doing. And given that we're increasingly globalized, right? 50 years ago, having a French wine for dinner was, oh my God, that's wow. Today, having a French wine for dinner, I mean, it's just every day, right? I mean, every 2 days. And so data and goods are flowing in a way that is creating an enormous amount of confusion. So yeah, perhaps the appellations are good to just remind the consumers where it's coming from. It's for sure that's going to be a thorn in the arse of France, right, and Champagne. But I don't think we should kid ourselves. It's going to keep happening. You're going to see China, you're going to see India coming up with different ways and different labels, and it's going to piss the rest of the world off. We should adapt to it. We should really make sure that we deal with it as opposed to trying to prevent it, I think. Same as, I'm just going to broaden the topic widely, same as global multinational corporate taxations. You're now seeing countries starting to talk to each other in order to appropriately tax large corporations based on where their consumer are and where they make money, not necessarily where they're established. So all of the countries getting along with each other and saying, yes, we're going to call this champagne. No, we're not going to call this champagne. That's the same kind of a broader macro level kind of a topic.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of previous on this. I don't know if some of you remember Yves Saint Laurent producing a perfume called Champagne, which was ruled as inadmissible by the courts. I think the great news here, as Laurie mentioned, is that we are talking about minuscule quantities of exports. I totally agree with Jonathan that protecting the integrity of the brand is probably pretty important. And if you're sitting at LVMH headquarters, it's really, really important. In fact, it's paramount. So it's very easy, it's very easy for them to just withdraw what they have or stop supplying into the Russian market. And the fact that, a bit like, I don't know, Cuban cigars in the United States aren't available directly, it'll suddenly make it all the more sought after and exciting for Russians. I've no idea why he particularly chose this sort of.
Oh, yeah, it's political. It's got to be political.
This tiny little sort of battleground, sort of equivalent to sort of Hamlet Act 4, Scene 4. But anyway, we'll have to sort of figure out why, I guess, in due course.
Yeah.
Well, that was it for episode 12 of the Wine Tech Insiders podcast. We covered a few new startups, female founders, and Shampanskoye, Champagne, Russian, French foreign relations.
We all need to pronounce it by next week.
I will try. I need some Russian lessons.
Shampanskoye.
At least, maybe it's going to inspire more people to learn Russian. Your insiders are Laurie from Oushinery, Nick from Wine Owners, Jonathan from Bottlebooks, and Seb from Troly. See you all again in a few weeks.
See you later, guys.
See you next time.
Good seeing you.